designed for parents and kids. This is your host, Sasha, and I am so glad today I have with me Serene Leeds. She is a writer and a communications strategist, and I've invited her to come on my show because she is parenting a neurodivergent child. And I know that there a lot of other parents out there have been working with that too. I have a neurodivergent child myself, and I am just so happy that you're here to talk with us about that. And we'll just kind of see what we can learn from each other. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, Sasha. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, there are so many topics that I know that we're going to be touching upon today because, yeah, it's been really a pleasure connecting with you on a lot of
Yeah,
different
in a
subjects.
lot of
Yeah.
different ways. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little about yourself and just how you help people. I mean, I mentioned that you're a writer. I'm an aspiring writer myself, so we had that in common. But tell me about a little bit about what you do and how you serve the world.
Certainly. So, like you said, my name is Serene Leeds. I am a professional writer and podcaster. I spent most of my career as a journalist. I still am a journalist, but about 3 years ago, I made the decision to go back to school at the age of 44 because the majority of my career, I always wanted to be an entertainment journalist, and that is what I absolutely love doing. I love writing about TV. Already, easy segue for my shameless plug. My free download is called 10 Things I Learned from Getting Paid to Watch TV because
Awesome.
I love writing about TV. But what started happening was, especially after I became a mother, it was very difficult for me to maintain my career the way that it was before I had my baby, because being an entertainment journalist is a 24/7 job. And once I had my baby and everything I was going through, which I now know was probably all connected back to her being neurodivergent, I was realizing that I had very set availability.
Mm.
I found myself not being able to be flexible with anyone. And so I realized that I could not have the same career that I once did when it was just me and my husband. So I decided to go back to school right when my daughter entered kindergarten, which read, I was no longer paying for full-time preschool
Daycare. Yeah,
daycare. Right.
exactly.
That
Exactly.
was the
Isn't that
so
almost like getting a raise? It's crazy how much difference it is.
it really is. And I do have an article all about that. So
Of
yeah,
course you do.
I do. So since becoming a mother, I have ventured into women's health, parenting, wellness, lots of different topics. So like I said, I am still a journalist. I am a contributing writer to Rescripted.com, which started as an infertility site, but has really branched into all forms of women's health. So by all means, please go check that out. So I went to graduate school to become a professional writer, and it was really just to see how I could take the skills I already had as an entertainment lifestyle journalist and just channel them into different areas because I needed flexibility. In my current situation, I cannot work full time in an office. I need to work for myself. So to answer how I serve the world now, I still serve the world as a journalist, but I also do that by working primarily with female small business owners in helping enhance their business and brand copy. Primarily, my focus is website bios, but I do email newsletters as well. So what that entails is, and this is something, Sasha, you and I have been talking about recently,
Yeah.
figuring out your brand voice. Because if you are like me, what we call a solopreneur, you are your business. So people need to get to know you. So I work with clients to draw them out, to get to know them, and then present them to the world.
That's wonderful. Brand voice is like, if you can get that smoothed out, even with an undefined throat, you're like, that's half the battle with online marketing. So
Absolutely. And
beautiful.
I'm learning as I go, because what I really like to do with my clients, and this is where I bring my journalism into the experience, is I always like to interview my clients because I
Nice.
need to know who they are.
Yeah.
And so I take that, but sometimes I'm still not getting it quite right. And one of my business mottos is I cannot read your mind. You have to tell me
I
what
love
you
it.
want. And that's not just for my business. That has been my outlook, throughout my journalism years. Whenever I would have an editor who I always have to be careful when I talk about editors, because there are so many wonderful editors out there. And also, we as writers need editors.
We do.
We really do. It's very easy to get offended and be like, why are you messing with my copy? No, you need that extra pair of eyes.
Yeah.
However, in the journalism world, in the media world, too often people are put into editorial positions where they really don't know how to edit, and they just want to exert their power, and they will just give you notes that's just what they want. And my reaction to that is normally, well, I can't read your mind. There's no way I would have known something like that. So circling it back to, I just use a term that I hate to use. Circling
So
back.
sorry.
So bringing it, no, that was me. So bringing it back to brand voice, and this is something that I've been learning with my clients. As a client, you need to have at the very least some idea of what your brand voice is. And as you and I have talked, there are tons of prompts out there that can help you nail that down. And then it's my job to take what the client has given me and turn that into something that is clear, cohesive,
Right.
authentic, effective. Those are all of my keywords. And that also sounds like them. That sounds like the client. So it's
Yeah.
a challenge, but I
I have
love doing
I
it.
have tons of respect for that because I have a hard enough time writing my own copy.
Right.
Like writing for someone else. I don't know. You would think with an open throat center that I would just be like, oh, it is easy for me to amplify voices, but it works a lot better if we're talking than if it
Yeah.
than when I'm writing. But
Yeah.
I want to come back to because I'm curious, do you do
Yeah.
editorial services? Because I actually think there's a lot of solopreneurs don't actually have anyone looking at their copy before they put it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up. I do. That's actually how I started. And this will bring it back to my own podcast. I spent 7 years on staff at Rolling Stone magazine as a staff copy editor.
I am so jealous, but just saying. Rolling Stone, oh my gosh.
I have some great stories that I'm more than happy to share, but if you listen to my podcast, you will quickly learn that it was a dream job that became a nightmare.
I'm
And
sure.
yeah.
Well, still.
No,
What an opportunity.
and I get that all the time.
Yeah.
So I will soften the blow by saying, yes, I have met Paul McCartney and I have met Taylor Swift.
Oh my gosh. My mom, my blessed memory, that was
Yeah.
her first love was Paul McCartney. She said it was
Oh,
love at first sight. She was 5.
of course.
Let's talk about your work-life balance. I also know a
Yes.
lot of my audience as female entrepreneurs who are raising families
Yeah.
are like that's a hard balance to strike. I want to ask you, I personally find that working for myself sometimes is harder than working for someone else because I can't just be like, my shift's over, I'm done, I'm going home. But on the other hand, I do have the freedom of working at midnight if I have to, because when my kids are in bed. So yeah, and I'm definitely at the same season you are, where like being in an office away from the house and working somewhere else for a structured part of the day is just not going to work for my family right now. But
Yeah.
I do have a little bit of wiggle room, to now that my youngest is almost 6, to be able to
Yeah.
do something to help the world. So yeah, tell me how you work on, because I really want to hear your story about your daughter's the process of diagnosis too. So let's kind of move that
Perfect.
way if
It's
you're
the
ready.
perfect segue. So I'm so glad you've asked that question. So, and I know that this is really hard for people, and it's been really hard for me to establish this. It's all about setting your own work boundaries. So you may have noticed this even when we were trying to set up this podcast time. My primary work hours are when my daughter is at school, because that is really the only time that I can be 100% focused on my business and I have the peace and quiet that I need. As a writer, it is very hard to get a project done if your kid or even your husband is in the same room with you.
Right.
So, so when it comes to, I mean, if it works for you, work at midnight. Like
Yeah.
that does not work for me, but
I
if
don't
that
like
works for
it.
you, do it. Yeah. And I, depending on how at peace my brain is, I, for the most part, actually try not to write or answer emails outside of that general 9 to 3:45 Monday through Friday block. The reason why I am able to maintain those boundaries is because, and now we're really getting into it. So I am the parent of a 7-year-old neurodivergent girl. She is our only child, and she takes up a lot of my time and energy. I am very strict with people in the sense that I actually can't take phone calls when she's around. I'm very clear with people. I say, please, if you need to talk to me on the phone, shoot me an email. We'll schedule it, and I will give you my 100% undivided attention. But if you try calling me at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, it's not going to happen. I cannot have that conversation with you. So let's backtrack a little. We started to realize that our daughter was going to need some extra help when she was in kindergarten. She had gone from a Montessori preschool where we really had never been contacted about any sort of behavioral issue. But then, of course, she moves into a public school. We're in the New York City suburbs. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was getting emails constantly from the teacher about behavioral issues, how she wasn't listening, she wasn't following directions. And it was just piling and piling and piling up. And one of the things that unfortunately exacerbated the situation was the year my daughter was in kindergarten, she had this wonderful teacher who unfortunately had to take a leave of absence like 2 months into the school year. And then they were having trouble finding a substitute. And then they brought on a substitute who clearly was in over her head. And then like a month before the school year ended, that substitute like left without warning, citing personal issues. And so that did not help.
Not to interrupt, but to put it in
No,
the
please.
context of world events, I think we're just coming off the tail of COVID too. So the school
Correct.
system's kind of a mess at the moment.
Exactly.
So,
And I always like to throw in that we were extremely fortunate when it came to COVID, and our daughter, her preschool never shut down.
oh wow, that's
So
wonderful.
she was able, so in those first couple of years when like the school psychologists were trying to figure out what was going on with her, they immediately wanted to blame, well, COVID, and she couldn't be in
Sure.
preschool, and I would always shut it down. I'd be like, nope, that
Right.
wasn't the problem. So eventually, I would say in the second half of the year of kindergarten, it was clear that they were continuing to have issues with her at school, and I needed to get some extra help. So I called my pediatrician, who immediately passed me along to a developmental pediatrician. I mean, they passed the buck immediately, and this is what I think that a lot of parents of neurodivergent children are going to appreciate, is how long everything takes, because these physicians are so booked up that we did not get our first appointment with the developmental pediatrician who could do any sort of assessment or diagnosis until June 2022, at the end of our daughter's kindergarten school year.
Right. So almost 6 months you waited.
Exactly. And even then it was telehealth appointment. So yeah,
Oh,
it was
dear.
crazy. So we did a telehealth appointment with this developmental pediatrician, and she did diagnose our daughter with ADHD.
Okay.
And she created a 504 plan. And so our daughter went into first grade with an ADHD diagnosis and a 504 plan. And what I started noticing was that the developmental pediatrician was really not involved in our daughter's care. I was very confused. She would always say, "Oh, just do a telehealth with me every 6 months." I was like, "What? Okay. Do you recommend anything else?" "Oh, there's a social development group she could go to." I'm like, "All right."
Very
So
supported with this new information.
not this was not helpful at all. So basically, she did first grade with the 504 plan, but I could see that she had an amazing teacher, but she was still struggling. And then, so I would say last summer between first and second grade, things really started to break down when she was at summer camp, and she had a meltdown one day, and we had to take her home. So I immediately called the developmental pediatrician. I said, we're in a bit of a crisis. We need help. And so we decided to start her on medication. And even that became a separate process. I mean,
Sure.
we're doing okay now, but it took many, many tries of different medications until we got something right.
Hmm.
Our daughter
Yeah, it kind
started.
of feels like you're a guinea pig in that stage. I've worked with in a former
Absolutely.
life, I was a counselor and a lot of adults that need mental health meds, and they really are just like, let's try this, see how your body likes it. If it
Yeah,
doesn't work, come back in 6 weeks and we'll try something else. And like
exactly.
you have to really have I mean, for the child, for your daughter, like
Yeah,
she's just experiencing these different feelings from these meds. Like it's hard with her lower engagement in the process to feel like, why am I going through this? Where, even
exactly.
adults that are like, I'm not sure I'm not depressed. I don't know if I want to go through all this. So
Exactly.
it can be kind of yeah, like you said, a definite
It
process.
really, really, really is. So she started second grade, again, 504 plan, but again, a few months in, the teacher was like, "I'm constantly calling for additional help." And sorry, let me backtrack. She did begin the social development group.
Oh,
Um,
after the camp meltdown.
Yeah, actually right before the camp meltdown. And
Okay.
after the camp meltdown, we got her into individual therapy. And that's
Oh,
another thing I know that parents of not neurodivergent children will appreciate, because that also takes months of research, then finally getting the appointment, all of that.
right.
So by the time she started second grade, which is what she's in right now, our daughter was on medication, seeing the developmental pediatrician maybe a little more often. Now that she was on medication, the developmental pediatrician was like, "Okay, I'll see her a little more often now." I'm like, "Oh, great." An individual
Of
therapist
course.
was phenomenal, and the social development group, but unfortunately, still struggling in the classroom. And when I say struggling, I just mean behavioral. She is academically brilliant, but it's just getting her to sit still, all forms of executive functioning, listening to the teacher, following directions, all of those things. So by December 2023, it was decided that we needed to have a special education committee meeting, which of course took forever. And then we finally had it at the end of February 2024. So the school did a huge evaluation on our daughter, and none of it was surprising. And the school psychologist that our daughter sees now is fantastic. So, but the way a school evaluation works, and if you're a parent of neurodivergent children out there, please reach out. Let me know if you've been through the same thing. They will say something like, "Your daughter meets the criteria for the autism spectrum," but they won't give you an official diagnosis.
Right. So like
So,
And I
Yeah.
feel like for parents, there's two consecutive concurring things happening.
Mhm.
One is like a special ed evaluation. My daughter's brilliant. That kind of feels
Right.
weird, right? So there's a
It
whole
does.
like grief process going on there. And
Yeah.
on the other
Yeah.
hand, then they come back with, after all of these tests, they come back with a, well, she meets the criteria, but we can't diagnose her.
But we
So
can't
it's
actually say
almost
that that's
feels
what it
like
is.
anticlimactic in a way, right? And then you're on the
Exactly.
beginning of a new journey now to find an actual diagnosis.